The views expressed during this program are not necessarily the views of the station, its staff, or management. Equal time will be given to people with opposing views.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you
and good morning, Muskegon. And all of you out there in radio podcast, iHeartRadio, and Computer Land. This is Ian Muskegon, and I'm Jim Riley here in Muskegon's Clear Channel Studios with my friend Good Buddy. What did you call me, Little Buddy, this morning? Good Buddy.
Well, Captain's here, so
there we
Captain
go.
Little Buddy.
We've got Oscar, the legendary Oscar Osbo, and in the co-host chair, the poop deck chair, we've got Captain Fred Birch, and thank you for joining us this morning, Fred and Oscar.
Little Buddy.
I know. And I've already been called Little Buddy here for whatever reason.
Oh, come on, please, for the camera, take your head off and hit him in the head a little bit.
There we go. Next week I'll wear, instead of being chastised for wearing my radio shirt, my patriotic radio shirt, I'll dress up like Gilligan. We'll do that. There we go.
Sorry.
Hey, we've got a guest coming at the 9 o'clock hour, Republican Senate candidate, very important position, very important guy. This guy does have a chance to win. Gary Glenn, he will be our guest in the 9 o'clock hour. And unfortunately, you won't be able to speak with him because he'll be phoning in. But if you want to give us a call here and give us a question or make any kind of comments at all that are reasonable anyway, give us a call at 231-830-3109. Couple things that have got my attention on this day in history. Now, this is not maybe earth-shattering, but truly, for those of us who are older and we remember the certain technological changes that may not be necessarily high-tech, but a gentleman patented a particular item. He was a Hungarian, and his first name was Laszlo, and his last name was Biro. What did he patent back in 1943?
Budweiser, I don't know.
There we go. Well, actually,
this is an important one.
This is a name. This is a name that actually is much more familiar in Europe. Biro pens. He patented the ballpoint pen back in 1943. Interestingly, right in the middle of World War II. But for those of us who are airplane nuts, and I still suffer the pangs of no air show of these last few years, in 1948, something really big happened in airplane history. A very famous guy, first name of Chuck.
Chuck Yeager?
Chuck Yeager, with the Bell X-1, exceeded the speed of sound.
Oh, okay.
And created, at that moment, the legend, and he's still around. I was able to get a chance to meet him, shake his hand last year at the Oshkosh EAA Air Show.
He still wears his old flight jacket.
He's always at the Oshkosh one, isn't he?
I believe he is. Yeah,
I've got some stuff. By the way, if you want to see stuff on Air Show, I have on my YouTube account. You can see Oshkosh stuff. A buddy of mine went to Oshkosh and filmed it over there.
And absolutely.
Up, so.
Okay, I'll do that. And so that it's not just me visiting. How can people who are listening go to your video? The site.
Well, I just type in my name on YouTube, Oscar Osbo.
Go to YouTube and then type in Oscar Osbo, which is unique enough. Yeah. There we go. All right, well, good. Well, anyway, that's an exciting thing, I think, that happened today. But, two other things that really come into play that are affecting us today. And in 1991, the United States ended the 21-year trade embargo of China. How'd that work out for us?
Pretty good. We're getting a lot of money from them.
Well, there's a lot of money being exchanged. And in 1994, President Clinton intensified the sanctions against Haiti's military leaders because there was nasty things going on in Haiti. And, of course, that was almost, 18 years ago. And how do these sanctions work out for the wonderful folks in Haiti? Of course, they haven't worked out whatsoever. So sanctions don't seem to work. They seem to be the automatic response that politicians want to use instead of really doing something that would work. And unfortunately, Haiti is Haiti, and we seem not to care, except when somebody runs the videos of the poor starving children.
Yeah, when they have hurricanes or earthquakes.
Yeah, which we give most of the money to the leaders. Hey, a couple announcements of things that are coming up this week, this coming week, and they're really on Tuesday, June 12th. The county commission will have its regular scheduled full board meeting, and that will be at 3:30. But they will also have at 1:30 what they call a planning session. And, of course, these are the sessions that they do not want you to know about, they do not want you to attend, and they sure as heck don't like seeing me walk in with my video camera. But you are invited by law. Any citizen can attend these meetings. And there's a lot of stuff going on now. There's talking about the jail and how that's the interesting thing is they're talking about what kind of jail they are. So it's like the rich folks looking at real estate guides. Absolutely no discussion whatsoever. At least no public discussion that I've ever heard of how it's going to be paid for.
Well, it's our number one priority. So we just do anything we want.
Yeah, that's you bring up something that's important. Earlier this year, the county had a big meeting, one of these planning session kind of meetings, and they had all the department heads of Muskegon County, and then they had all the politicians there, and they made a list of the top 10 most important things that the county needed to address in 2012. Every single one of those issues, was a spending item. The balancing the budget, taking care of this enormous $110 million or $250 million underfunding of the county pensions and health care benefits, the disaster that we are now seeing is really unveiling in the wastewater treatment situation. None of those were on the list of the top 10 items that were the most important.
And not only that, but none of those items were service-related items for the people. The number one function of local government, the service they provide to the people.
What a great point, which I actually missed until you just brought it up. Thank you, Fred. How can we serve the public better? It wasn't in the top 10. Might have been 11th. Yeah, I didn't see number 11. But that wasn't even on the mind.
Was good jobs for people in there? Were local businesses in there? At what point aren't we just becoming servants to the government?
Well, we are. As a matter of fact, I firmly believe that is the view of far too many elected officials and frankly, far too many people who have been employed. And I would say this even in our fair county, some of these department heads, certainly some of the employees, do view us really as
ATMs.
As ATMs, exactly. Yeah, I was going to come up with a more offensive term.
Could I just make one
Absolutely.
Additional comment?
Please.
In addition to everything else that you've been saying about the top 10 list, et cetera, take a look at what they are measuring their standards of performance against. As I recall, the large measure of standards of performance was whether or not our employees are happy.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, the county administrator.
I want our employees to be happy, but that's not the important performance issue.
Well, let's get to the specific question that was asked, which I found fascinating, and I think we need to bring this up because and continue to bring it up. The county administrator was asked in a glowing set of articles by the Muskegon Chronicle, sometime down the road when you look back and see, how would you measure your success? And her response was very specific. She said, I would measure my success based on how satisfied the county employees were, or something very similar to that. And that really stunned me because you can imagine if Walmart had that attitude or General Motors, which actually maybe General Motors did. And of course, they went into bankruptcy. But these are there's a very old-fashioned term called civil servant. In other words, these folks are there to serve us. They are there to provide us with various services, and there does not seem to be that understanding. And there's certain, one of the reasons that I've mentioned this before, that I believe this show has some value, not just to the residents and businesses and taxpayers of Muskegon County, but also to anybody listening, is that what goes on in Muskegon doesn't just stay in Muskegon. It's going on elsewhere, and it's not just at the county level. Some of the counties, or some of the townships and cities, and I would say Fruitport Township in particular, are extraordinarily well managed. But some of them in Muskegon County are horribly managed. They appear to have taken the exact playbook from Detroit and used it to destroy their local government.
It doesn't seem like it's just Muskegon. When I lived here for all the years I lived here, that's what it always seemed to me. It was Muskegon. Okay, Fruitport was doing well, Spring Lake was doing well, all these other little towns, Holland is booming now. I mean, all these places are booming, but Muskegon just kind of stays there, and it gets worse.
Well, I think it's a matter of the government officials that we've entrusted our money to. If you take a look at, from a macro standpoint, I mean, isn't this really what the entire discussion on the national scene is all about?
Yes, Wisconsin, just last week. Shouldn't the government be serving the people rather than the people serving the government? And the only reason why you organize into government to begin with is to be able to do things that you could not do individually. And rather than having that happen, what's been happening is we're becoming a government that's like a self-licking ice cream cone. It exists. It exists to pay the employees. It exists to provide jobs. It exists to do all these other things, and that is not the function of government.
Yeah, that's what
well, it is. Sadly, it has become the function of too many governments, and as we just came up with examples of just their mindset. And I just want to go back to these meetings on Tuesday coming up. I will be at Carmen's Cafe from 12:30 till about 1:15 on Tuesday the 12th. I will then go to the meeting, which is over at the old Baker College campus on the corner of Pine and Apple. Certainly anybody and everyone is invited to sit with me. We can talk about what's coming up on Tuesday at Carmen's, but everyone is invited to come to this planning meeting, which again, no agenda has been set, but the spending tsunami seems to be gathering tremendous power. But immediately following that planning session, which ought to end around 3 or 3:15, then the commissioners and I will go over to the full board session, where they're going to have, in addition to their normal agenda, an open hearing on raising property taxes. So after this break, we'll come back and talk a little bit about the need for you folks to pay more in taxes, because the government here decides you need to pay more taxes.
You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes.
And we're back at Eye on Muskegon, Muskegon's only political talk radio show. I believe it might very well be one of the very few, if not the only, political talk radio show in West Michigan. We are talking about politics and how that affects you and why it affects you. I want to just go back to this meeting, which I do believe is critically important. And I will video it, by the way, and I will put it on eyeonmuskegon.com later in the day on Tuesday. But there will be what they call a Truth in Hearing meeting. Somebody on this wonderful Facebook site that is called Muskegon
Board.
It's Muskegon County. It's Muskegon-County, or it's Muskegon County-Board. Anyway, go to Facebook, and they've got tremendous things. But somebody put together a really cool little poster on this, and again, they're using the term, says, tell your commissioner to look for ways to save money and stop using our homes as their personal bank. So it's the same kind of thing you said. But this kind of spending, this kind of mindset will continue. Unless the folks in Muskegon rise up and do what the folks in Wisconsin just did, and that is vote out those people who view you as a personal ATM and who really have no sense of the top 10 things as spending. It's not serving. It's not looking at the fact that we are close to a bankrupt situation in terms of, there's three things municipalities can do. They can spend money. Okay, they can borrow money, which which bond issues and things of that sort, and then they can make promises, and therein lies what's bankrupting so many of our communities throughout the entire country, and frankly, that's what's bankrupting so many countries in Europe and the United States, and that is making promises. These are not bond issues; these are not spending issues. Promises for pensions and the health benefits down the road.
Yeah, did you see the elections in San Diego and San Jose this week?
No, I did not.
On Tuesday, if 70% of the electorate in San Jose, which is a obviously very liberal town, has voted to roll the pensions back for the city workers. In San Diego, I think the elections results were 68% for the same thing. Now, San Diego, of course, is a lot more conservative. But San Jose, 70% voting to curtail the pensions, and these are people that are already in the system, and they are going to start changing the pensions.
When people find out what's involved in these, and of course I've mentioned this before, and I guess today we're going to focus a little bit on the county commission, the county government, but we know that the county commissioners have voted themselves their $40,000 per year compensation package that includes. A cash of $16,000 to $18,000 or more per year, but it also includes lifetime pension. It includes lifetime health care benefits, of course, as they are county commissioners, but also when they retire or get voted out. By the way,
dental, don't they have dental?
Lifetime dental,
I just
lifetime
paid
vision.
for a crown. For $1,300 in a crown.
Well,
I could have used that.
Perhaps if you decide to run for county commissioner, you can do what I plan on doing if I do win my race.
I can get my toothers fixed. All right.
Well, I'm running. I am running for county commissioner. I'm going to be running in the Republican primary, and I'll be running against the long-term county commissioner Bob Skolnick. And one of the first things that I will bring up will be a motion to eliminate all post-employment benefits for county commissioners. I think it's important for people to understand that every single one of these benefits, every penny worth of their free iPads that they've just bought for themselves, their free internet connection for the iPads, is paid for by you and voted for by them. So they vote all this stuff for themselves.
I think you ought to take it one step further, and this is what I would do if I were elected to county commissioner. I would recommend that we go to a per diem pay system.
Absolutely.
Which means that you get paid for the amount of time that you put in on official work. Official work being the meetings that the times where they're actually in session that they go to. They did that in Holland. Now, I don't know whether that passed or not, but they were anticipating a savings of something like $40,000 per commissioner per year.
Well, these are things that, these are little things in the grand scheme, but it certainly gives you the sense of their mindset. There's an interesting issue that'll be coming up on Thursday. And again, these are all really more to illustrate the mindset. But there was a very big debate, primarily led by, I would say, the only conservative county commissioner on the current 11-member board, and that's Commissioner Alan Jagger. And Commissioner Jagger, there was a purchase of a very expensive, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, a compactor. And Commissioner Jagger said, hey, I've looked at other suppliers of this product could have saved us in the tens of thousands, if not in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they weren't even being considered because the people who were making the decision decided that they liked Caterpillar. And I'm sure Caterpillar was fine, but it was not by any means the least expensive item. Anyway, to make a long story short, they ultimately went back. The county commissioners ultimately went back, changed the rules after Commissioner Jagger said, let's look at the other one. And they made them so narrow that the only choice could have been Caterpillar. But they're going to vote today, next Thursday in the Public Works Board meeting. They will be voting to hire somebody to sell the old compactor and pay them a 10% selling fee, which I'm sure is very reasonable.
They don't know how to use Craigslist?
Well, no, I don't have a problem with this. I have a problem with if you've got a big expensive item, this is in the tens of thousands of dollars also, why didn't we trade it in? Why wasn't that an option? It was never brought up. It might not have been an option with Caterpillar, but I do know that they sell used ones. So again, it's not my money. It's other people's money. I don't need to think about it. Now we have to have a separate vote to go hire somebody to possibly sell this and another 10%. I believe it's like a $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 item. One other thing that we're running a little late on time, but I wanted to mention this. The county commission on Thursday voted to get the okay for this group that's going to be putting on Rock Stock, which is a group of local bands that will be trying to they'll have an event at a time when we used to have the summer celebration, and good for them. And I think that they're going to do a fine job, but they're paying a fee to use this county-owned, and by the way, the commissioners don't own it. The county people own it. We pay for everything that they do over there. They're going to pay the $1,000 fee and other fees, which makes a certain sense. But at the end of the article, it said, in addition, the agreement calls for Baskin, this is the person who's putting the event on, to pay the county 5% of the total admission ticket charges collected for the event. Now, again, this is the view that even somebody who's going to take the risk, who's going to bring people in this gigantic void that has been left by the summer celebration collapse. Here's someone out there they can't resist just sticking them with, we're still going to get 5%. And by the way, this isn't 5% of the net profit. This is 5% of the gross. They do this all the time. I know John Van Wyck has mentioned this many, many times. One of the reasons that other festivals nationally, certainly in Milwaukee and other places, have succeeded is that they've had support from the various municipality to develop the area as a concert venue. And there's a total realization that if it's successful, the taxes generated from the employment and the various other sales taxes and other things will in fact more than pay for the greed that we're seeing here again. And it's just
what is that money supposed to go for that they're trying to get?
How dare you ask?
Dental benefits.
How dare you
Dental benefits, yeah, there you go.
I doubt it would pay for the iPads that the county commissioners just voted for themselves. And again, that's the mindset that we have in Muskegon. Oscar, you said, here we are. Why is it always Muskegon?
Great too. They used to do that. They can't afford to do that anymore. I mean,
They view the mindset here in Muskegon County, certainly from our county commissioners and certainly from some folks in the cities, is that we are the piggy bank. How dare you come in without paying your gratis to us?
It's a feudal system.
Muskegon's got some great.
The lords have decreed it.
Muskegon's got some great people that can step up and do things and make money. But that's what I was trying to say to Steve Wormington last week is that there's so many politicians out there or people out there that will stop everything that's good about Muskegon. Muskegon has a lot.
Muskegon is an unbelievable.
Yeah.
But we can't. Unfortunately,
we
have the mindset of the people that we've elected, and certainly it's been a long, long time since we've had a turnover. Actually, Alan Jagger did beat a sitting county commissioner, but it's been a while. And we're talking about mindset. I want to hit one quick thing, if I could. New York City, a principal at the last minute banned, it was an elementary school principal.
You got 30 seconds.
Banned the playing of Lee Greenwood's, we should play this, God Bless the USA. And the reason for essentially was, and matter of fact, she walked in while these kids were rehearsing, and she said, we don't want to offend other cultures. Now, here's the problem. This woman has been in the school system for years. She's risen up to be a principal. People know who she is. This isn't a one-up item. We'll talk about this when we come back. Actually, we won't, because we've got Gary Glenn, Republican Senate candidate, coming up. So stay tuned.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you
And we are back at Eye on Muskegon, Muskegon's #1 rated political talk radio show on Sunday mornings with Oscar Osbo and Jim Riley and Captain Fred. Doesn't get any better than that. Hey, I want to go back a little bit, though, because we were talking about this. Oh, by the way, we are still waiting for Gary Glenn, U.S. Senate candidate, to call in. So while we wait for that to happen, we will continue on with our show. And the reason I bring up this situation with the God Bless the USA song is that it's an indication of a culture that most of us, I think certainly those of you who are listening on the show today, it's a culture that you can't even, in your wildest imaginations, imagine. You can't conceive that anybody would think this way. And I mean, think about, I know that most people, we were at the Indy 500 and they played God Bless the USA, and my golly, just about everybody, myself included, had tears in their eyes. And here you have someone who's teaching children, who's obviously been in the education world for many years, if not many decades, who's risen up to the level of a principal, and finds this song offensive to herself, obviously, and she's apparently feels that it would be offensive to other people who are attending taxpayer-funded American schools. And I think it's this kind of awareness, I hate to hear this story, but at least it's illustrative of the facts that we do have a culture problem in this country.
Well, and not only that, but you've got to remember this is only one of hundreds or thousands of these same stories that you see all the time. This is just one of many, and it's going on.
I think you should change it to Dudes Bless the USA. What do you think?
Dudes
Bless the USA.
Yeah, well, there may be, I don't pretend to understand the mindset, but I do very fully understand that there is a market out there for people who don't like this country, don't like patriotism. That certainly we've heard in the last few years.
And move to another country.
Well, they promised that they would move, but that's that's knee jerk, that's goofy talk. But they've said we don't like this out of control patriotism. And I'm going to give you the head here. I've got to take this.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there are. I mean, a lot of folks out there right now that are just they're not happy with the situation that folks are rallying around the flag, and a lot of it started after 9/11, which is interesting as well. I mean, here we took a hit, certainly not of our choosing. Ended up in a situation that was not something we wanted to have happen, but it happened, so we had to react. And,
and during 9/11 and the Gulf War, I remember God Bless the USA was played on just about every radio station, whether it was format fitting or not. They played it. So.
And
there's a big discussion going on now in the state of Michigan with some of the Republicans want to require that the Pledge of Allegiance be said in the schools. And the simple facts are that the opponents to this legislation are saying, hey, everyone's already doing it anyway, or very few are not. Well, it may be that most everybody is doing it, but of course that's what a law is all about. We don't have laws that we're not getting rid of our murder laws because not everybody murders somebody. But I just think that keep in mind we have a culture out there that does not have respect for the American flag. It does not have respect for American patriotism. It does not have respect for the reality that America is an exceptional country, has been and will continue to be. And if we just sit back and let these folks like this principal, I would imagine this principal is going to be able to keep her job. And I can't imagine this is the first time that she's ever made a really awful decision. So we're going to have to move away from this because we do have the United States Senate candidate on the phone, Republican candidate Gary Glenn. Gary, are you there?
Yes, Jim. Good morning.
Well, good morning. Appreciate the call.
You bet. I came in the middle of your conversation. What story were you talking about? What principal?
Well, we were talking about in New York, there's a principal who had banned the singing of Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. There was going to be a show that apparently they'd used this same song for many years, and she found this amazingly to be offensive to herself, obviously, and to others. So she banned that. So anyway, we know those folks are out there.
Right. Well, the reason it caught my attention is you mentioned respect for the American flag, and it's an issue that I'm going to be talking about in the near future. The American Legion has for years and have come close several times, but have promoted a flag desecration amendment to the United States Constitution to give Congress the power to prohibit the desecration of the American flag, to burn it, to put it on the ground and stomp on it, like this, this group from Kansas does at military funerals, which is despicable. Yes. And perhaps surprisingly, one of the only 8 Republicans in the United States House of Representatives who voted against the American Legion's flag desecration amendment was Congressman Pete Hoekstra. And I've talked to American Legion members, and they remember that vote. And it's going to be one of the issues that I'm going to be talking about in the next 8 weeks. Is just one of the issues, and there are many that distinguish my candidacy from that of former Congressman Hoekstra.
Can we come? I want to come back to that, because to me that's maybe, at least as a person who is going to be voting in the Republican primary, that is I would say my number 2 issue in terms of how are you different from the others in that race. But can I ask you one that frankly is more important to me, and I gave it to your scheduler, so I hope I'm not catching you unawares, but as a Republican, as a conservative, I'm not quite sure who said this, but we want to elect, it might have been Bill Buckley, you want to elect the most conservative, or you want to nominate the most conservative person who is electable.
Right.
And I believe that of the 4, anyone would be such a significant betterment than Debbie Stabenow that I would be willing to take any of the 4, at least as far as just replacement. So what I'm most concerned about, and the folks that I speak with, and by the way, I'm here with Oscar Osbo and retired Navy Captain Fred Birch. I didn't introduce them before, and then I apologize for that.
Captain and Oscar, nice to be with you this morning as well.
Nice to have you.
Same.
And anyway, my concern is, okay, why should I waste my vote on someone who doesn't have an opportunity to beat Debbie Stabenow? What I want to do is I want to make my vote really count. I want to vote for that one of the 4 now that are in the running, and who can convince me that you can beat Debbie Stabenow. Why is it that Gary Glenn would be the most able to beat Debbie Stabenow in the general election?
Jim, if you look at what's happened in the U.S. Senate primaries across the country over the last month or 5 weeks, there's been a consistent pattern. The candidate who is supported by the Tea Party movement in these Republican primaries in Indiana, in Nebraska, in Iowa, Texas, 3 out of the 4 occasions, has won the primary, even when it's been a surprise. The state senator in Nebraska was like at 5% of the vote 4 weeks before the election, ended up winning, beating 2 statewide elected officials. And I have the endorsement of about 80% of the Tea Party organizations across Michigan. We went through a several months process of being vetted and debating all of the candidates. And what does it mean? What does it mean to have the Tea Party support in Michigan? We've seen what it's meant to have it in the last month in other states, but just an indication of what it's meant in Michigan is that my campaign had no paid staff circulating petitions to gather these 15,000 signatures that are the highest signature requirement in the country just to get on the ballot. Every other campaign had paid staff circulating those petitions. They kept telling us how tough it was. The media was having a good time, speculating that we wouldn't get enough signatures even to get on the ballot. That happened to one other candidate. And on the deadline on May 15th, my campaign turned in more signatures than any other candidate, including Pete Hoekstra, thousands more than Clark Durant. So that's just an early indication of what it'll mean on the ground. The question is, how does a low-budget grassroots campaign compete with, and in this case, outperform bigger name, bigger money candidates? There's a good example. We turned in more signatures than anybody else.
Okay, well let me hone in here a little bit. That sounds to me like someone who's running obviously a very good campaign. I love the fact that you got the most number of signatures, and that would lead me to think that okay, this man who's got a tremendous history, and I've done some research on you, and I've met you actually on a few occasions and heard you speak, and I must say this Gary Glenn is an incredible speaker and tremendous in person. But that still tends to primarily the primary. When you win the primary, you're going to be facing the labor money is going to be pouring into Debbie Stabenow as it has for the last almost 12 years or over 12 years actually.
She's never lost an election.
Okay, and so how are you going to? What are you going to say? Number one, to raise the money and to convince the people that you can beat her. Again, I'm not talking issues. I'm saying, okay, I've got to win this election. What is it that makes you different from, let's say, Pete Hoekstra, who's obviously almost a local guy out here in West Michigan, or any of the others? Why you and not them?
Well, actually, I think the answer is all about issues. It's going to be where I distinguish myself on issues, and this is a new political environment in the sense that after the Citizens United case, you have these super PACs that can spend an unlimited amount of money. So if whoever wins the nomination in Michigan is going to be the beneficiary of lots of money from across the country in any state where they think you've got a chance. Now, tell me if I surprise everybody and beat Pete Hoekstra, that people will not at least be open to the possibility that we could have another surprise in the general election. If we run the same type of standard Republican establishment campaign at Debbie Stabenow that the party has done for the last 25 years, we'll get the same result. She's never lost an election.
What are you going to do differently?
Well, there are several issues. Number one, I think the number one issue is the amount of jobs that we've lost. But there are several issues. One, Pete Hoekstra, because of his voting record, and I'm going to keep bringing us back to issues, and we can get into those in detail. But having spoken to about 50 or 60 Tea Parties across the state, when they find out things like Pete Hoekstra voted for the Brady Bill gun control law and for the Wall Street bailout, they might vote for Pete on Election Day instead of Debbie Stabenow, but they're not going to work their hearts out knocking on doors, putting up yard signs, and making phone calls for Pete just because he's a Republican when they find out how often he has voted the same way she has on key issues. The American Legion folks are not going to be happy with Pete over the flag-burning amendment. The Tea Party movements are not happy with Pete because he voted in favor of the Brady Bill and the Wall Street bailout. And so I'm going to be able to win the support of regular Republicans and Tea Party activists. And here's a couple of occasions that I want to make an example. If you're a candidate who can secure your own base and then go outflank your opponent in their own base, then you're going to be in a position to win. How
would you outflank Debbie Stabenow? Because it would seem to me, and I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit, but it would seem to me that some of the issues that you just mentioned that Pete Hoekstra had voted for would be somewhat popular anyway with Debbie Stabenow's base. It would seem to me that would be outflanking her base. What is it that you would be doing to outflank her base and bring it in?
Well, two examples. Two issues in particular, and these are two issues that the standard, typical Republican nominee for statewide office is uncomfortable talking about. I've been president of the American Family Association of Michigan for the last 12 years. I'm one of two co-authors of the Marriage Protection Amendment that was on our ballot back in 2004. A lot of people say, aren't you concerned Debbie Stabenow will bring that up? Well, no. If she doesn't bring it up, I will.
Bringing what up now? Bringing what up specifically?
The fact that I am a co-author of the Marriage Protection Amendment that was on our ballot back in 2004.
Okay.
That when it was on the ballot, got 60% of the vote statewide. That according to polls, won support from 2/3 of African Americans and 2/3 of all union members in Michigan, which won in the city limits of Detroit and Flint and Saginaw and Benton Harbor. Where I spoke in African-American churches 8 years ago in support of that amendment was warmly received. When Governor Mike Huckabee came to Michigan to endorse my candidacy in December, our MC that day was a black pastor from Ypsilanti, in whose church I have spoken on several occasions. I'll be able to go into Debbie Stabenow's own base, 2/3 of union members, 2/3 of African Americans. That is the Democratic Party, on an issue that I'm closely associated with for having provided leadership, and on which Debbie Stabenow is out of step with her own core political base.
Okay,
African Americans and union members.
You bring
That's
this
just
up,
one example.
and I must say I find it quite compelling. But you bring that up first. Is that your primary issue going to be in the general election, or what other issues will you be talking about again with the hopes of beating Debbie Stabenow?
No, that is not my primary issue. It's
Okay.
the issue that's the answer to your question, where you pressed me to say, what are the issues that will allow you to beat Debbie Stabenow? Another one, I think, the typical Republican seems to sit back and act like a punching bag and play defense.
Oh boy, that's the truth.
But Debbie Stabenow is an extremist on the issue of abortion. 70% of the people in Michigan oppose abortion if its only purpose is to make sure you don't have a girl when you wanted a boy. And yet Debbie Stabenow opposes any restrictions on abortion, even if it's simply for sex selection. Debbie Stabenow voted against the partial birth abortion ban, the late-term abortion, where the baby's body is delivered almost completely out of the birth canal, and then a hole punched in the baby's skull, and it's the contents of its skull sucked out. Debbie Stabenow is opposed to even that restriction, to prohibit that gruesome procedure. And the typical Republican nominee and the consultants would say, "Oh, don't touch those uncomfortable social issues." Those are issues with which I'm associated. According to the Michigan AFL-CIO's own poll, 1/3 of union members in Michigan support having a right-to-work law. I've been endorsed by the National Right-to-Work PAC because 30 years ago, I led the campaign to pass a right-to-work law in the state of Idaho. I'm a founding member of Michigan Freedom to Work, which is pushing passage of that here in Michigan. If I'm a U.S. Senator, I'll support a national right-to-work law. Pete Hoekstra has been endorsed and funded by Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters, has opposed right-to-work legislation. And Debbie Stabenow is on the wrong side of 1/3 of union members, part of her own base, who think they should be free to choose whether to join or pay dues to a union. So I'm just saying that there are several issues that the typical establishment Republican candidate will not use, will be uncomfortable using, that I'm so closely associated with, it wouldn't be smart for me to try to disassociate myself with them to begin with, but on which I will aggressively hold Debbie Stabenow accountable on these issues on which she's out of step, not just with conservatives, not just with Republicans, not even just with voters at large, but with core elements of her own party's base. And that's how we're going to beat Debbie Stabenow, with an aggressive, issue-oriented campaign that the typical Republican establishment candidate is unlikely to be willing to use.
I must say I find that refreshing, because I've for years, perhaps even decades, believed the same. And certainly Scott Walker showed that standing tall and standing firm is a winning issue for those willing to have that courage. We've got a break coming up. Can you hang on a little bit? We'll have you right back after the break.
Thank you, Jim.
News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well,
And we are back at Eye on Muskegon, Muskegon's #1 rated political talk radio show. And we have with us Oscar Osbo, Captain Fred Birch, and a special guest today, and very, very happy to have you here, Republicans United States Senate candidate Gary Glenn. And thanks for hanging on there, Gary.
You bet, Jim. I appreciate that. And let me direct your listeners to my website at garyglenn.us. And Glenn is GLENN. garyglenn.us.
Very good. And I'll put a link to that on the eyeonmuskegon.com blog, too. You're actually convincing all of us sitting here in the studio, as we talked off air, about the fact that standing tall for some of these very tough issues that are not socially acceptable in polite conversation in certain areas. We are yearning to hear someone stand up and articulate the reasons for or against.
Right.
One I'll just read this. We have, as you may be aware, some very serious problems in some of the Muskegon schools. And the city of Muskegon school system just a few months ago, added a new curriculum. Now, this is a school system that is in very serious trouble. It's not as bad as Muskegon Heights, but they just added a new curriculum addition. Quote, it expands the information provided to 4th and 5th graders to include sexual intercourse and homosexuality. That concerned some people who said the curriculum was inappropriate and usurped parents' roles in educating their children.
You think?
You think. And again, that is a brand new. In other words, we have a system that is in very serious trouble of dropouts and graduating, getting actual high school diplomas that have essentially no value. And this is the best that the people on that Board of Education could come up with. So I do believe that social issues, if articulated well, will resonate. What other things, one of the neat things, it seems to me, that if you're going to run against Debbie Stabenow, is that you have a wealth of votes that she's taken that ought to really upset those of us here in the state of Michigan.
Oh, no question. But let me give you some examples. See, you're so correct. And to put up against her a Republican nominee who is actually vulnerable to getting outflanked on the right by Debbie Stabenow is unthinkable. So let me give you some examples. I gave you examples of issues on which I can outflank Debbie Stabenow in her own base.
Okay.
Let me give you some examples of how Debbie Stabenow could truthfully outflank Pete Hoekstra among conservatives who don't know any better on these issues.
Well, you're educating me on a few already.
Well, I mean, number one, Pete Hoekstra voted for the Wall Street bailout, $850 billion out of our tax dollars to pay off Wall Street investors and bankers who made bad decisions. That's the very issue that brought the Tea Party into existence to protest. Hoekstra voted for the Wall Street bailout. Debbie Stabenow voted against it. She could truthfully, accurately run a TV ad that paints herself as more conservative, more responsible with tax dollars than Pete Hoekstra on the Wall Street bailout.
Actually, that stuns me. I did not know that.
Okay?
That's
Pete
interesting.
Hoekstra is one of only 8 Republicans in the House of Representatives to vote against the American Legion's flag desecration amendment.
Okay.
Debbie Stabenow voted for it. She could truthfully, accurately run a TV ad like George Bush Sr. did against Mike Dukakis back in 1988, wrapping herself in the flag, painting herself as more patriotic, more respectful of the sacrifices of our veterans, and more recognizing what the flag stands for to them and to a lot of other people. If you have the most liberal senator in America, and she is characterized that way by National Journal, which is a mainstream media publication, tied among 10 other senators as the most liberal senator in America, being able to truthfully, honestly and accurately outflank the Republican nominee on a key social issue like protecting the American flag and a key economic issue like voting for the Wall Street bailout, that is a formula for getting beat. I can outflank Debbie Stabenow in her base. She can outflank Pete Hoekstra in our base. And if you secure your base, fight for the middle, and are actually able to go win votes out of the other guy's base, you win.
Okay, that's what I so much want to hear, because when I've heard other groups of Republican Senate hopefuls get together, they tended to focus on how conservative they were, which is fine. But again, the ultimate goal here is victory in November, and this I must say I'm impressed, and I like hearing this. Let me ask you this though:
Yes.
You can't be the only smart guy out there. I know that Clark Durant and Heckman are pretty smart guys too. You've got, essentially, and I'm also running for county commission for my first run at elective office. So I'm looking
My
at.
condolences. I was one of those ones.
There we go. Well, I'm old enough so that win or lose, it shouldn't be too painful. But the facts are that. Your other opponents in this race, I would imagine, have somewhat similar views, and it's sort of I'm for Hoekstra or I'm against Hoekstra voting block, and the I'm against Hoekstra block is going to be split 3 ways. How do you address that?
Well, there are distinctions between me and Clark Durant as well. For example, I support term limits on members of Congress, and Term Limits America PAC endorsed me this past week. You know, when Pete first ran, he promised voters that if they elected him, he'd limit himself to 6 terms. He broke that term limits promise.
Didn't the Supreme Court, though, actually rule on term limits and say that the contract with America was unable to, it was passed, I believe, and then the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that.
Term Limits USA has endorsed me because I have pledged to support a constitutional amendment that would limit the terms of Congress just like the Constitution does the President of the United States. So it would take a constitutional amendment.
Okay.
I favor that. Clark Durant opposes it.
Interesting.
I think the ideal tax reform is a fair tax, and if you don't know how that works, I encourage you to look it up at fairtax.org. Clark Durant opposes the fair tax. It would allow us to shut down the IRS. We wouldn't need a federal tax collection agency. This was one that surprised me when it came up. I support environmentally safe onshore inland drilling, where you drill down half a mile away from the water's edge, then at 1,000 feet down, and then at an angle till you hit $8 billion worth of oil that's found underneath the Great Lakes, which the Michigan Environmental Science Board says there's little or no risk of contamination of the lakes because you don't get anywhere near the water.
Now, is that a federal issue at this point? I thought that the state, the legislature had voted against that.
They did, and Pete Hoekstra voted for Debbie Stabenow's legislation federally banning any such drilling, even the environmentally safe drilling. The Canadians have over 2,000 wells sucking oil out from under the Great Lakes. There's not a border down there under the lakes that says the Canadians only get to drill and suck out to a certain point. So we have our Canadian neighbors across the way with over 2,000 wells. We have none. It would bring high-paying oil and gas jobs, lower gas prices, and energy independence to Michigan and America, and I favor it, and Clark Durant sides with the Sierra Club and is against it. So there are distinctions between me and Clark. We can't let this discussion go by without talking about Wisconsin and what happened there and the distinction that points a spotlight on. And by the way, any of you guys Wolverine fans?
You're talking to a Spartan here, so
okay.
Gary, tread very delicately.
All right, you got Spartan fans. I know we got some Wolverine fans among our listeners, but football season's still 3 months ago. I feel like singing I Think We're All Badgers this week on Wisconsin.
Okay, and I'm all for that.
And this is going to, I think, be very surprising to folks. I've already mentioned that Pete Hoekstra was endorsed and funded by Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters. He's had a record of opposing right-to-work legislation. It's why the National Right-to-Work Committee has endorsed my candidacy, because I've been a leader on that issue. But look at what Scott Walker did. It's an historic turning point. Scott Walker stood up to the compulsory power of government employee union officials and gave us hope that we as a country can save our country from bankruptcy and socialism. The role that Michigan's next U.S. Senator could play in that historic turning point will be squandered if we send the big labor Republican back to the United States Senate. In 2007, Barack Obama introduced a bill that would have, by federal mandate, forced every state and local government in America to unionize all of its police and firefighters and paramedics. This is when he was a U.S. Senator. That would have had at least two effects. It would have strengthened the political clout of government employee union officials, would have given them a stronger stranglehold on state and local government budgets. You actually have 6 states right now that don't have any kind of government employee unionization, thousands of communities. But Barack Obama's bill would have forced it by federal mandate on every state and local government in America. Does it surprise any of you guys, Captain Oscar? Does it surprise you, Jim, that Debbie Stabenow co-sponsored that bill along with Barack Obama? Does that surprise you?
Absolutely not.
Okay. It doesn't surprise me, but it's news to me that she did it. So that's what I want to hear, types of things brought up.
Now hold on to your shorts.
Oh, my golly.
Does it surprise you that Congressman Pete Hoekstra co-sponsored the exact same bill in the House of Representatives?
My shorts just flew away.
Yeah. So
seriously?
You've got a guy who's endorsed and funded.
Is that on your website, that information?
Yes, it is. It's H.R. 980 in 2007, co-sponsored by Obama and Stabenow in the Senate, co-sponsored by Pete Hoekstra in the House. opposed by the not only the National Right to Work Committee, but the National Association of Counties, the Municipal League, the National Association of Sheriffs, supported by the Firefighters Union, the Service Employees International Union, AFSCME, Teamsters, etc. The very thing that Scott Walker is looked to for being a hero for standing up against, Pete Hoekstra sided with Debbie Stabenow and Barack Obama in trying to strengthen the power of government employee union officials. Our role that we could play in saving our country from bankruptcy and socialism will be squandered if we send to the United States Senate somebody who's got a record of taking us in the exact opposite direction as the direction that Scott Walker led us this past week.
I have always believed, and certainly Scott Walker has proven it, and perhaps you'll prove it in August and then in November, but I've always believed, like Ronald Reagan and others, that if you stand tall on an issue that is really does resonate with Americans, you may get beat up by the newspapers and the other media, but the silent majority, the true Americans are out there. They do care. We're running a little out of time. This is sort of joking, but how do you handle, certainly with conservatives, it's not an issue, but this cash for clunkers thing that Pete Hoekstra voted for twice? It does seem, at least his advisors convinced him that it was a good idea to vote for it twice. It's anathema to conservatives, but it may very well be a positive issue in the general election. I'm sure Debbie Stabenow voted for it. How do you address that?
Well, Pete Hoekstra, I think people have come to the recognition that with a $15 or $16 trillion debt, that we're at a point where the very existence of America as we've known it is at risk, and that's an unthinkable thing to me. It's something that would have been beyond comprehension as an American, that we could be staring down the same type of fate as we're seeing on TV out of Greece and the riots in the street and that kind of thing. So I think the fact that Michigan has lost the most jobs of any state in America, 800,000 jobs in the time Debbie Stabenow's been in the United States Senate, so on her watch, we are at a period of economic peril. And in that type of environment, Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to get a different result. If we keep sending back to Washington the same politicians, Republican or Democrat, who've been there for 2 decades, who voted in favor of all these bailouts and debt ceiling increases that got us into the mess we're in now, is it rational to expect the fiscal insanity in Washington will end? I don't think so. Pete Hoekstra voted not only for the Wall Street bailout, he voted for the $192 billion stimulus package, 5 times to raise the debt ceiling to $11 trillion, some of these outrageous earmarks like the $223 million bridge to nowhere, voted for the Brady Bill gun control law, and is on the wrong side of history right now on whether or not we're going to have taxpayers make the decisions and their elected representatives, or whether we're going to have government employee union officials who can force people to give them money under threat of taking away their jobs.
Well, Gary, I got to interrupt you here because we are running up against a break. You're very compelling. We will be putting this entire show up on ionmuskegon.com sometime later today, and I'll send you a link, and anybody listening out there can do the same. Thank you so much. Give me one more time your website.
Gary Glenn, Glenn, GaryGlenn.us, just like running for U.S. Senate. That ought to be easy, GaryGlenn.us.
It'll be easy for us Republicans, I can promise you that. Thanks
My
for calling in.
Guys. Enjoyed being with you.
And best of luck.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes.
And we're back at I Am Muskegon. Oscar Oswald, Captain Fred Birch, and Jim Riley, your host. Interesting, I thought, conversation with Gary Glenn. I've heard him speak before. Frankly, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think I learned a lot. I didn't know certain things about Pete Hoekstra's voting record and some of the others. I can't really emphasize enough how important it is that we all do our homework on this Senate race. I do believe that the state will not be well served for 6 more years of Debbie Stabenow. Her liberalism is just truly out of step with almost everybody in our state, with the exception of the hardcore liberal left.
One thing that sticks out in my mind about Glenn, I remember when I saw him over at the Tea Party thing over there
up in Oceana County in the winter,
is that he had mentioned something about his son, about something about his father had died in war, and that his father, or not his father, but his uncle or whatever, and his uncle was the same age of his son, and he had his son stand up. Was that Glenn?
I remember it happening, but I
think it was it. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
I think that what you were saying, Jim, is important. I think people have got to do their homework at this point. And for the folks on the conservative side of the issues, the primary is extremely important. That people need to do their homework. They need to figure out who it is that is the most conservative or best conservative that can get elected in the fall, that can beat Debbie Stabenow. And people have got to make up their minds from that perspective so that we can put a rational candidate up against Debbie Stabenow. And as you said, she really needs to go away.
Well, the only reason I was bringing that point up, I just want to make it real quick, was because of the reason that I thought the guy was very, very well spoken and definitely know how to use the audience and use the crowd to get their emotions going. I mean, he was definitely a politician. That's all I got to say.
Well, he's running for a political job, and I think that I hate to say that I'm not all that interested in who gets nominated, and that's not true, but. We gain nothing if, in fact, we nominate someone who does lose this election. And we have an opportunity. Everything matters on this August 7th vote if you are a Republican. And, again, you just don't want to walk into that voting booth not knowing, and then just default and say, well, geez, I've heard of Pete Hoekstra. I'm going to vote for him, which is not a terrible thing to do, but is it really doing you what's necessary? And I'll tell you, some of the votes that Gary brought up that Pete had made, they are a little disconcerting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's and some of them are almost, I would say, deal breakers. One of the things that
deal breakers for who?
For me.
Okay, for a conservative
from a conservative perspective, a fiscal conservative voter. For example, the votes on what happened with the car industry and the stimulus and the bailout packages. You need to understand that there's always the unforeseen circumstances or the unforeseen things that occurred because of those votes. For example, we destroyed the bankruptcy laws in this country. It is one of the primary reasons why we are currently in the recession that we are in, and that money is staying on the sidelines, because we cheated the bondholders of General Motors, and we gave them 10 cents on the dollar when they were supposed to be the first to be paid out of all proceeds. And instead, what we did was we struck a deal where we gave the GM stock away to the unions and to others, and we cheated those people. We cheated the dealerships.
That at the time, I was a financial advisor, so I was in the middle of all of these events. I was dealing with clients, and I was dealing with my own account also, and. I must say that what you bring up is I don't want to dwell on it because it's kind of picayune on certain things, but it is huge, and the net result is, as you've just said, the Captain Fred, that when the government steps in and changes the rules in midstream, people with money step away.
Right, exactly, and that is why people are not doing the investing that they could be doing into our economy. Now, just to bring it back to a local level. It's the same thing that if you award a bid to the not lowest bidder, that people will no longer put the bids in, and therefore you will continually get higher and higher costs for the government. It's the exact same principle. Because if you bend the rules, then people understand that you bend the rules, and they will no longer apply.
That sadly is happening in at the county commission level. I know it is happening at the level of some of the cities and townships. I found it very refreshing. Well, the comment was refreshing. This was at a Norton Shore City Council discussion about putting in a rule for bidding that would favor local companies. And I believe it was Lowell Kinney who said, well, then we're going to take it from making an investment decision and make it a political decision. And that, to me, he really beautifully encompassed what's going on here. Anytime you go out of simple logic, in the same way that you would, for instance, would you pay extra? You might pay extra money to buy a car that was for sale. Let's say it was a Chevy in downtown Muskegon because it was a little closer and blah blah blah.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to drive to Grand Rapids.
Yeah, you might make a logical decision.
Maybe $25.
Well, it might be $100. But the point is, you would make that decision based on your own rules. But if in fact, like we're seeing with so many of these decisions that are being made by local municipalities, where it has to be somebody local, and even though their bid is higher than the rules that have been set in place, the Muskegon County has rules that say, I believe it's a 1% favor, which I think that's not unreasonable. I would be against even that, but that's not unreasonable. But on a regular basis, our municipalities, certainly Muskegon County in particular, they are violating the very rules that they set in place. And what that then results in is what we're seeing now, which they're going to be voting on, I believe, on Thursday, is that we're not getting companies willing to bid on our requests for bids, because bidding is an expensive venture.
Yes. And
they don't even have a policy in place when they reject a bid for that is the lower than the one that they accepted, for notifying the bidder as to why that they were rejected. And you get a reputation in the same way that Detroit did, the entire Wayne County, which is also, believe it or not, I guess not surprisingly, on the verge of bankruptcy. But you get a reputation of Flint, Detroit, Benton Harbor, Muskegon Heights even. Don't even bother with them. They will not be fair. They will set up rules and policies that they will violate at whim. And that isn't good for the public. It purely makes it a political decision, and unfortunately, again, the only way to change it, you're not going to change the interior minds of folks like Bob Skolnick and John Snyder and Marv Engel, who've been there for 10 years and every one of them wants another 2 more years. You're not going to change how they vote, and they vote with the Democrats almost 100% of the time. You need to change those people. And we do have an opportunity for that. Hey, I want to touch base. We got just a few minutes here. I want to recap the county lawsuit. People have been asking about this, and I filed suit against the lawsuit. Now it's about 6 weeks. I think it's over 6 weeks ago. Quite simply saying, or charging that they had violated the Freedom of Information Act and they had violated the Open Meetings Act. And there's been much back and forth, and we have offered a variety of I wouldn't call them concessions, but offered them more time. And simply what we want them to admit, what the county to admit, is that they violated the Open Meetings Act, which in fact they did, and they won't do it again. That is the touchstone right now. That's what the county is fighting against. And it looks like now the county, which has unlimited free legal, which we do not, I most certainly do not, they are fighting, and it looks like we may have to take this to court based on the fact that they will not admit that they violated this law, which they most certainly did, and won't do it again. And
money talks.
Well,
money and lawyers.
It does if they're going to run me and the citizens of the county off. But this is the arrogance of the county. If we have to go to court, we certainly will do it. There's just simply no reason for it. And you might want to ask your county commissioner
if that's a wise expenditure of the taxpayers' money.
Absolutely. And I know that the policy, at least the practice, has been of most of the county commissioners, with the exception of Alan Jagger. Again, I know it gets boring. It gets boring that Alan Jagger, always stands tall alone. But it has been the practice of county commissioners to say, "Oh, I don't know anything about that." They stand apart. And the reason I bring in,
Yet
I don't
they
know.
were involved.
well, the points are that somebody is responsible for how their attorney is doing things, and it's the 11 county commissioners.
Well,
it's
and
as simple
not
as
only that, but they were involved in a specific incident, which leads us to believe that if they don't know anything about it, then they don't understand what the rules are that they are bound by.
Well, you know what? I get caught in the minutia, and that's so important. Remember what this is all about. This is about the $2.35 million out of nowhere secret meeting where they came in and made a quick vote. No committee meeting on this. There wasn't even, matter of fact, county commissioner again, Alan Jagger, said, wait a minute, you're just throwing this on us. I don't understand this. I need some time to look at it. They took a vote. The vote was 10-1, not to give more time, and in fact to do it. And then once we finally filed suit, we did get one piece of information that showed that the county had given an additional $1.2 million in 2011 to the Brookhaven care facility. So they don't want you to know what's going on. With the help of the attorney David Wells, who's been wonderful at providing legal services for us, not to attack the county and not to waste money, but they've got to stop doing these things, or we're going to find Muskegon County, as you said, Oscar, earlier. Why is it always Muskegon? You know, we've got Ottawa County has a 6.1% unemployment rate because their jobs went up. Our unemployment rate went from 9.2 to 9.1, and jobs actually went down. The only reason that the rate went down was because people are leaving this county. Same people making the same decisions, as Gary Glenn said, will result in the same crummy decisions.
Loved it when I came here 30 years ago.
Well, it's a great place to live. Yeah. It's a wonderful place to live if you don't need a job.
There's great people here, but there's just people that don't make the...
There's one other very important thing, and I want to scream at me when we're running out of time. But
we're running out of time.
Okay, well, I want to touch on this. All 10 union contracts were signed at the end of last year. But in the union contract, there was a little piece that they put in, said union contracts can be reopened annually. Now, I had no idea. It doesn't say what for. But the county commission, again, went into secret, private, closed session last week to talk about union negotiations. So the contracts, which are absolutely abhorrent. I mean, you talk about a Cadillac benefits as from employees and also including retirees and pay and everything else. The contracts that were just signed, and if you recall, they were signed specifically to get under the governor's requirements of good governance. They snuck them in before his rules came into play. Now they're reopening them again in secret, in private, to who knows what
probation.
effect. Well, it's just like Animal House. It's double secret probation, and anyway, that's an ongoing issue. Hey, don't forget to check out newstalk1090.com live streaming. Of course, maybe you're listening to that already. Don't forget, I'm on the Talkin' Muskegon show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on WKBZ with John Van Wyck and Brian from 8 to 9 o'clock every morning, or every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We also, Oscar, you've got our show, the video of our show, so you can see us slurping our coffee every Monday night from 8 to 9:30 on TV 38, which is channel, is it
397.
397 on Comcast. So, thank you, Fred. Thank you, Oscar. Thanks to all of you listeners. We continue, our ratings actually continue to go up, and we're excited about that. We are reaching more people. And you can listen to the show and pass it on to your folks a little later on today. Usually on Sundays, I'm able to upload it onto YouTube, and then I put it on eyeonmuskegon.com. So we want to make it available. We want your questions. There's all sorts of contact information on eyeonmuskegon.com. Have a great week in this beautiful place, Muskegon. Next week, we'll put the eye on you, Muskegon.
In every pocket of my clothes.